Rashidele Tajakala Jobo Gezun Basamana. Rashidele.
Rashidele to all the Sangha joining us on the live stream.
Welcome everyone to the question and answer session with His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche. And we will begin with the questions that have been submitted. The first one is a question from a 7-year-old girl. Why bother living if you will die at some point?
Sumbudeya mashi satang ba chekcha me deore ti sumbudeya ti kopar no kyore kanta shegora kare chego de ti samotang gore shegora kare de nga mashalo sabe sege pe ni ba chibo yore mashalo sabe inji miji chibo tada mashi satang ba chekcha me de ti samotang tanga kopare sam te trim losom trimno
댕기들 독초들 댕기도 뭐랑 마시 삼긴 면도 뭐랑 마데 삼기도
마데
간사 니마트라 칸다 시고라 봐 되니 인지 문지 시고나 되니 단다 인지 문지 단다 시나 초고라 봐 되니 단다 유르보디 겸지 야마라 봐 되니 단다 시나 초고라 니마시 시고나 되니 단다 시나 초고리 나 마시 삼긴 면도 나 마데 삼기도
마데 삼 오 마데사 우르마사다 마데나 아데 마데 마사 데 마데 오 마시 셰나 데나 셰나 데나 데아 마는데 버차지는 나오는 버차지 데 이거 말이 다 강이 야물 제시로만시 야물랑 사라세지 shena mashara karene kangi khadisul kangi ji sona deji rangi kucho tri gore kucho de jina trije ngao nya pade yo mari ngao nya pade le pa cha sa ba ji de yo re nga she nga na sa na sri pa cha sa ma de kangi che yo re ji cha ro de kucho chi ba de se rang kucho tri ne de rang pa cha de mi ro yo re 그러니까 샘데 대시 인보인데 고초들 이적이나 야무리 샘지 속에 피고서 신나 양들이 신나 마시는 그 마시는 쳐먹고는 되게 핑이요래 야 이렇게 너나 나시 마치지도 말이네 피고서 물어지도 말잖아 마셔야지 신나시지 셔 마셔도 피고서 이 피고로 지네 samtidig det den når så jo meget og så trives det samtidig det pingo sådan
so don't think about what will I live? Will I not live? What's the point of living? Whether you are alive, whether you stay, or whether you die, what has to become eliminated is the imprint, the karmic imprint of grasping at a self, this me. And whenever that arises, whether you're alive or not, think of a deity, any deity, for example, Tara. Basically, whenever you have some difficulties, whether it is about being alive or not, best is if you're able to remember the 3 jewels, because then there is no thought of I in the mind. And all the karmas and the imprints, they arise out of this I. And so these thoughts of I am going to die or I am going to get sick, all of these difficulties that the I experience as already some imprints come from this sense of me. And so ideally, you're able to remember the refuge of the 3 jewels, because then this imprint will go away. And then also remember that your mind actually is Buddha in nature. And so for this reason, you can remember the 3 jewels. And even if not, at least you can think about sentient beings and wishing to help them. And so without thinking whether I die or don't die, don't even think about what is happening to you. So whether you're alive or you're going to die, think that I want to benefit sentient beings, no matter what is the circumstance. Just don't even think about what's the point of me living or me this or me that. Just think of may I benefit sentient beings. And so it is possible that one dies. It's also possible that you don't die. No matter what is the circumstance, remember altruism, remember love. Then you will definitely not be mistaken. So even if you're not able to remember the refuge of the 3 jewels, always remember love and the wish to benefit others.
Question 2. I have done many years of practice, but I still encounter many obstacles. Can we improve our karma for this life, or will the karma we create manifest only next life?
다다다 스만 니가 피게요. 야민세게 다다 냠니제는 강에 제바데 티 블루소로 그래. 한바치데 다다 릴라스 위성 양 한마를 레박차데 이집이 상고요래. 상대는 들고 나그 빙제그 콜로로 그래. 대답지 들이 가에 피게요. 오 다다 너희들이 양 한마를 레드 상을 요래 있어한들이 너희 총거리 들이 스마 같이 다들 내려서 다들 내가 사와 스마도 지야 스마가 또 나오래.
So actually your practice is beneficial and it will help in this life and also for future lives. And whenever you encounter obstacles or difficulties, you should think that you're repaying a karmic debt. It is said that if you wish to know what you did in the past, in a previous life, then look at your present body, your present life. So by any means, the karmas, the imprints that we have accumulated in previous lives must become purified. And so until then, they are stored in a mind just like a picture in a camera. So therefore, the benefit of the difficulty is when you recognize that now this suffering purifies my past karma. And when you recognize that, you will also suffer less. And then also it is said, if you wish to know where you will go next, then look at your present actions. So whatever you do now is mainly also kind of in preparation for the purpose of the future lives.
Number 3. How can I balance in my practice between 2 extremes, laziness and excessive effort?
또아치 못해 야가 요래 또아치 못지는데 내로왕 손을 대야 되잖아 또아치 못해 대야 요래 가족들은 또아치 보여 버려 아가 만나버려 내로치 보여 버려 당한 놀고도 랑치야서 말하는 거 생기 준도 쌍마서 그래 너는 냠니 삼지 생기 소라고 돼 쌍마서 그래 그 소를 가리 빠졌는 대용을 해서 듬제리 지치고 지고 그랬지.
So you can't really actually have necessarily this balance, but actually of these two things, not laziness and excessive effort is much better. And so laziness is not so good. So whenever you feel like you're making an excessive effort in the practice, then you should recognize, now I'm actually not wrong. And then whenever you're lazy, then you should recognize, now I'm wrong, because I have to purify my mind stream from previous life still. And the purpose of that is the practice. And so, as we said, it is just like these karmas are just like these pictures that are kind of stored in the mind. And so, in these moments, then also, therefore, develop an even greater trust in karma.
Question 4. What can I do to become self-confident?
뽑아기야라 당 용계고래 싸움로 당는 나게 스분 쇼로데 싸움 맞을 레디 인지 듬제리 지치고 찌르더니 뽑아기야래 들리잖게 뽑아지 사족스럽 때 계고래 사족스럽 같이 있기는 사바다 휴지 같이 촉지를 뽑아치를 로요래 나디들 뽑아서 총으로요래.
So you need renunciation, and if you really think about it, it's also because these karmic imprints, the tendencies in the mind have not become purified, and so once they become purified and your trust in karma increases, you will naturally be more confident. And actually, also we can say generally, your confidence increases as your bodhicitta increases. So the more love and compassion arises in your mind, the more self-confident you will be. And the more you grasp at the self, the more you will lose your self-confidence.
Question 5. I work in an organization that helps protect snow leopards and supports local communities in Asia, but worry my efforts are not enough, and if I make a mistake, it will create problems for the snow leopards and local people. What can I do to avoid these negative thoughts?
산에 되게 미망 성격 this 로바기야 럭처스 이야기 제도레스 하디 딜레가치기 요시나양 디니 잠창아 딜레가 노르시기 요레 데디 나디 콜라 셈처 쳔부도스 카이세는 나 레가 노르소나 데니 셈첸데라페 노바마보 용고 요 데니 미망 노바 용고 요서레스 디니 남덕 냠바마보 랍기 요라와 텔라 카이시 요레
저딴 피부탑라고 그냥 타버리 피부탑 상한테는 되게 노르소나 대니 빠지고요 말이 핀발인 정도로 생구 끊이게 되고 홍대에서 아시보리 핀이가 될 소소 고소를 내리 안 고소를 내고 소리 마소 싸봤나 버타봐 인천이 저렇게성 제고 말 소지 샘도 상황 뭐 피고 상황이니 소차도 세잖아요 그때 기억하는 정도로 됐다고 쪼랑 그런 기치 보여래 이 기치 보 말이지.
So actually, if you have a motivation really from the bottom of your heart to benefit them, then even if you are making mistakes, actually there will be no fault. Actually, it will still become beneficial. So the motivation is what's most important. And then whether or not your efforts will benefit them also depends on their karma. But if your motivation is completely pure, then you don't need to have any doubts about that. So if your motivation is pure and you just want to benefit them, then even if they get killed, for example, the activity still becomes virtuous, because mainly it depends on your motivation. and then the other is actually then secondary. What happens then is really secondary. It's most important to have the right motivation.
Question 6. Is self-love allowed in Buddhism?
As long as you have love, you're fine. But it's good to have great love, which is love for all sentient beings. And so it's the wish, may all sentient beings be happy. And it's to remember that all sentient beings have been my parents. So the love that's for all sentient beings, that's truly precious.
Question 7. How do I know if someone is my root lama?
lama tamchi lakdi lama mangbo jini soso lama dire nero nga hako songsan unle tsawe lama tege tsokuyore tege raga tsawe lama kare ibati tata sama mangbo matang mangsheki te tsoku mari lama sama tsashi borede lama tamchi jini muso jiwa ngasa lejuri mekche jiwa ngasa lejuri mashine mekmewana chadi yore tata chipoyon tona 그래서 lama 탐색을 가던데서 lama 탐색 사지가 삽주가래서 저 자고 먹었잖아요, 그래. 가을라마 담보들하고 잡지도 맞춰서 됐어요, 그래. 잡지도 봐 속히 때는 대사라마 담보세서 그래.
So there are many different lamas, and among them all, if there's a lama where you think that this lama, it is through this lama that I have understood, I've seen the nature of the mind, then you have found your root lama. But actually, don't even think about who is your root lama actually, because most people actually don't really feel that, recognize that. It's better if you think that all the lamas are precious. And that is because the lamas open our eyes to karma, also since previous lives. Because if you don't know karma, you're like a blind person. And therefore, remember the kindness of all the lamas and think that all the lamas are actually one with the Buddha. So it's better to have devotion to all of them in general. But also it is said that the first root lama that you encounter is the one that gives you the refuge vow.
Question 8. The Dharma talks about sexual misconduct mostly in the context of girls. I work with victims of sexual abuse, and many of them are boys who were sexually abused during their childhood. How does the Dharma deal with the sexual abuse of boys?
놀러 sep지선데 등에 찌왕치바지 참아들이 ramba sep지나 리셈나 등에 째줘봐 대서질라 ramma 삼제데 들이 등에 저래 째니 봐요래 대기시기로 플락과들이 로그블랑 속발나들이 제르티니들이 끼망보 등에 마에 줄라 강이망보 등에 강이망보 채용을요래 놀러들이 sempham kosola sawa sabjeti ni ba dongore there is any children the topo nyuma the rang the topo no topa the la so what the kan chibo yore
So in the Dharma, you speak more about, in general, actually, the cause of suffering of all sentient beings. And so sexual abuse or rape and so on is the result of a certain cause, and it is the result of having harmed the bodies and the minds of sentient beings, and having abuse them physically or mentally, or even cause them disappointment. And especially sexual misconduct leads to a lot of suffering, and also leads to a lot of suffering in the mind. All kinds of difficulties arise. But in brief, we can say that all the activities that kind of hurt others, even others' feelings, others' bodies, and any activities that come from a mind of anger will lead to negative results like that. And then as a result of sexual misconduct in this life, for example, one will have lesser friends, or one will be unable to find a partner, and so forth. So one encounters just a lot of difficulties.
시당 대냐베 저 차대 너네들이 야세라리는 책좀 잡시에 초성 데르티들 고고래 지왕 탐지 라왕 탐지 대와티 지왕 탐지 동의지 저지 다다 동의 저 가서 라랑 대 철코로고요래 레사바보들 철코로고요래.
And we don't even need to speak about like actual physical violence only, physical abuse and so on, but also verbally. Not even like straight out verbal abuse, but even if you're speaking to others in a harsh way, if you say something that disturbs the minds of others, and then it causes them to feel upset and angry, then actually you have created a cause for birth in the hell realm. That's why in the 37 practices it says you must not use harsh speech toward others. And so this is how we should also understand that point. So also it is denying freedom toward others. So it's like forcefully taking away the freedom of others, because it is said that all freedom is happiness, all lack of freedom is suffering. And so what is the cause of suffering? So it's to create, engage in these actions. And then whatever action one has then created, karma will come back around and one will experience the result.
너는 해당의 차도스래 대근이 말이지 데르들이 르그이 나타베 드리마 데르도 드리 샘도 샘 너선 샘당 차도 지는들이 대중대들이 탐사가 아마 요래 서망고도 가 나니 해당의 차도가 저들이 서망가 아마 요래지.
And actually, it's not just toward human beings or living beings, or like humans and animals, even inanimate things, like, for example, trees or the earth or stones and so on. Even if you get angry at them, or kind of are aggressive, for example, you're really angry about this tree branch and then you just cut it off. So there, actually, the Buddha spoke much about even that is a great fault. So basically, what it really comes down to is that anything that you do that comes from a mind of anger and jealousy and so on is a great fault. And the body is just a branch, and the speech is much more severe, and then the mind even more. So it really comes down to the mind, these negative thoughts in the mind, or anger and jealousy and so on. So when these are prevented, when these thoughts are prevented within the mind, then actually all negative outer activity, action is naturally prevented.
Question 9. How does immeasurable love and compassion help us see that sentient beings are empty of inherent existence?
Teni sam ninje kompala tene teni semchen thamche ta tongba ni impa khande pengi yore ti tongba ni impa khoya khande pengi yore sam ninje konya de
이 삼바다 니게티 조자버들이 세고들이 조자버들이 나디의 유무관의 처럼답을 빼는 시간만 차라송을 노차를 장자송을 도착을 대리들이 세종화 차장장 대라서 와들이 시간이 차와 노차 장아 그래서 차당 이렇게 떠먹지 차당 멍소니 먹자리 대리들이 생물에서 말하면 생대식이 뭐 하는 더 찌르들이 다다 기다도 차도 이도 주변에 제
So it's because love and compassion are like the warmth in the mind, and self-grasping and the afflictive emotion are like an ice block, and then also hatred or anger is when it gets too hot, and attachment is when it gets too cold. And so it's actually also related to the outer elemental heat and cold. It's similar. So anger is related to heat and attachment to cold. And then they arise from the root of ignorance. And these three make the mind kind of unpliable, unworkable. It is obscured. Buddha nature, the worst obscurations that obscure Buddha nature are anger and jealousy.
Question 10. What is the reality source visualized in the secret chakra when practicing Vajrayogini?
파모 냠len 세드 teni sangne la chunchok komgorwa chunchung teni ti chunchung se karares
춤종들이 별로 서춤종 남카리 나도 춤종을 설섬지 설속지 요래 대양 춤종원애들이 설섬도 것은 소말이 세고 빼리 춤종을 야요면 저는 반복해서 돈이 고고 요래들이 설섬도 것은 소말이 들이다가 것은 롱스는 코데이 같은데 미나 것은 저러고 요래 마미는 리몽 독섬 차고 거가 미성섬 차고 요래 제 미마미 매도 상문다를 데르들이 발라서 빼라서 진종이 야래 진종집 받아서 선택을 해야 돼.
So on the external level, on the outer level, the Dharmodaya or the source of all phenomena, an outer example is space. It represents space. And there are triangular Dharmodayas, and then Dharmodayas with 6 corners, or a double triangle. But the actual Dharmodaya, source of phenomena, has just these 3 corners, just a triangle. And these 3 corners of the triangle represent the 3 kayas. And the Dharmodaya is also an example that illustrates the mind. So that shape illustrates is a sign of the 3 kayas, which is the nature of the mind. And so generally, because it also represents like emptiness, like empty space, that is the essence of Vajrayogini, Vajravarahi. Her nature is emptiness. And so regarding the 3 kayas, so from the expanse of the 3 kayas arise all of samsara and nirvana. And when the mind becomes matured, then the mind becomes the nature of the 3 kayas. And in an immature state, the mind has the nature of the 3 poisons or the 3 lower realms. So it is just like the seed of a flower inside the mind. And the Dharmodaya is the shape of this triangular shape of the Dharmodaya is just an example, an illustration. But so generally, I would say it is 3-cornered.
남과를 빼가야 돼. 남과 세는 때는 파버려. 남과 세는 때를 파서는 남과 세 코라는 쓸 때는 그리 다다 뭐 동바드 즉 ramjin sarve shi de sem sabo tomani yin sabo la to kha ha ko yo le tukje ko la chapa de minute tukje lin jon ro le tuni ma minute mo le be na ko ngao nya ba da cha ngo yo le de we de chi jok de ko de yi ga chang yo le ko de chi sam che de chi na ta ju ko som no lo chang go yo le de mi ma min che pan ne de to mo to o sem tu na pa to ba ta le si 대 도마니 라미사베 시데는 오 도마니 사고 하고 요래 들이 투지 걸 잡아되는 들이 메뉴스 나다 나오냐마데 로마티 시바테들이 가사가 잡대 별 zu골 잡아 잡대 요래 새 잡아져 하고 말이 세분이랑 돌아들이 거기 탑실을 잡대요 하고 요래 내로 맞도록 나오 저부터 리더까지 들이 카드로 속도 대시 때라서 봤더니 뭐 동바람 예사와 투기 끌어 잡아서 대스면 들었음 그래지.
So the triangular shape is an example of the mind. It represents the space-like nature of the mind. So what we really need to understand through the Dharmadaya is that mind is indivisible from space, like space. So you recognize that when you look at the mind and you see the mind is completely empty in essence. So that is one corner of the three corners, the empty essence. But then even though it is empty, there is also a clear knowing awareness that recognizes clearly all the thoughts arising in the mind. And that's the second corner, the natural, clear awareness. And then the third one is the all-pervasive compassion. So it is just that for as long as the mind is in an immature state, it takes on the form of me, this I, and so this concept of me that creates this dualistic concept of samsara and nirvana. But when the mind matures, then it is just nirvana. So basically all phenomena of samsara and nirvana arise from the same expanse of the three kayas, which is this dharmadaya. The only difference is whether or not one has recognized that or matured. So again, when you look at your mind and you see that my mind is empty, just like space, that is the empty quality. And then the naturally clear awareness is when you recognize that there is emptiness, but also I recognize and know that my mind is empty. So there is this knowing awareness. And then the all-pervasive compassion. So when the mind then matures, then this neutral kind of state, or the state of or this indifferent state, or the state of me, this thought of me, then becomes expansive. You recognize the expansiveness, but actually the mind awareness is already all pervasive. It is just that we don't recognize the natural all pervasiveness that our consciousness already possesses actually. But when you realize the nature of the mind, then you actually realize, you experience how it actually pervades all of samsara and nirvana. It already does, but we don't recognize that, we don't experience it. But it already does because, for example, the mind pervades the entire body, even if we cannot understand that it pervades everything, but we can understand that it pervades the body. For example, when you prick yourself with a needle, then immediately your mind goes to that sensation. So that shows that the mind is all pervasive. So again, the three corners of the Dharmadaya represent those three qualities of the three kayas, which is the empty essence, the natural clarity, and the all-pervasive compassion.
그것도 좀 보나는 송거리 대니 이렇게 상계에 말을 셉지 고한 장성도 통나 세고 내려 통상 사지에 가서는 매일로 그래 마음에는 뭐 독서를 많고 로를 독차로 그래 대리 이제 적들이 통상만 통 미도만 미되는 세고 내려 통상만 통 대체발이 미는 세고 내려 통상 미이제 메도 소음을 받다고 마음에는 들이다를 돌아로 서울도 돌아로 해 서울 반창게 힘이 잡으라고 그래 로를 독자 이 샘이 이제 코랑들인 줄 알아요 말이 코들이 코알은 참나 양종 살았더니 인상적 생동 제라 양명이 듣고요 마음을 명이 듣고요 나도 내가 마음에 들이 능력이 좀 로를 차고 그래 이제 저기 제고 그래 지금 세부 배에
In the Shamatha Bardo prayer, it says, if you recognize it, you are a Buddha. Not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. When you recognize the nature of your mind, then you ripen. The mind ripens into the Buddha's 3 kayas. And for as long as the mind is in an unripe state, there are the 3 poisons, the afflictive emotions, and these create the 6 realms of samsara. But there is a single ground, a single basis. The only difference lies in mature or immature, having ripened or not ripened the mind, or having seen or not having seen the nature of the mind. So it is just like the difference between the seed and a flower. If the seed does not mature, does not ripen, then the seed becomes spoiled. It is like throwing it into the garbage. It is like wandering in the 6 realms of samsara. However, the basis, the ground of mind never changes. However long you wander in samsara, at the end, at some point, whenever you encounter the condition of bodhicitta in the future, the mind can still mature. Just temporarily, for the time being, it is in an immature state, and therefore that perpetuates the 6 realms of samsara. But so that's all shown by the Dharmodaya, by this source of phenomena. It represents this single ground, this single basis, or you can say it is an example of the mind.
Question 11. Please give advice on my experience of feeling vibrations like wheels turning all over my body after I wake up, and something seems to be punching me in the stomach in my sleep. This only happens when I don't practice the highest yoga tantra. When I do, I don't wake up in pain.
Sanga di lana mebe sanga rwa di nyamle majena kesi penas kasang di nyamle mazena teni tering shokeni setu teni kopa na la pe nageto pena minga tungwa nangshen pe nageto ina yang kasanga las di sanga hlayo rwa di sanga lana mebe kyu nyamle se yuna teni di kholo di yo ina yang di nagementok pena kopo tungwa nangshen nagementok
다티 미마미 개발되리 콜로들이 콜로시 랑시 롱기 좀 말이지 소들이 센데 레롱데 이식을 롱이래 사하냐니 제디 이식을 롱는 좀 저요리 이식을 롱들이 땅이 가요 말에 라면 이섬 하고 요리 유모버 롱도 쪽으로 들이서 보는 나사 무서야 요리 다다지 않마기 유모벨에서 다다양 레사도 사죠. 저렇게 레롱 짓을 장르더니 내롱 같이 사하도 맞지 레롱 짓을 장도 레롱을 강에 삼아 레롱이 저거요래. 이식을 롱들을 강에 요면 참아 이몽이 실리 좀 저거래. 강에 내가 돈 대래야지. 그것도 보면은 내가 레그 상지에 대해서 딴 민소리 이식을 롱을 해야지. 마르크스지 고아도 레롱을 해야지. 레롱 짓을 롱을 해야지.
So that's precisely, we just mentioned before, that's the difference between ripe or unripe, mature, immature. And so this wheel also, or these kind of vibrations that you feel in the body also is related to the wind energies of the consciousness. But so basically we have two kinds of winds. There is the wisdom winds and there is the karmic winds. When you practice the Vajrayana, then the winds turn into wisdom winds. And the wisdom winds never have any difficulty. That's why there is no pain when you practice the Vajrayana. It is because the wisdom winds recognize non-duality. Whereas if you follow your afflictive emotions, then you're following your karmic winds, and that leads to such negative physical sensations like pain or sickness and so on. So all the negative karma that we have accumulated in previous lives with afflictions now ripens, and we actually continue to accumulate negative karmas with the afflictions. And that is the karmic wind. It is those afflictions that we continue to follow. So we follow the karmic winds. But then when you practice the Vajrayana, you're not following the karmic winds, you're following the wisdom winds. So when you're not practicing the Vajrayana, that is a time when you're not recognizing the nature of the mind, then you follow the karmic winds, and all difficulty, all suffering comes from that, from following the karmic winds. Whenever you follow the wisdom winds, you will not have any difficulty. That is what we call transforming the afflictions into primordial wisdom. And that is why you don't feel any pain at certain times. So again, in the Samanta Bhadra prayer, it says, when you recognize it, you are a Buddha. And that means really when the mind matures, then you have recognized, you follow the wisdom winds. And not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. That is the immature state where you follow the karmic winds.
The Nelok thought of Mathog, Yishida, Yishilong, Long Tang Yumo, Nelok thought of Mathogri, they had a dark archibald, just something angry. Yishi longs of a man, Yishi longs of Gare, Dagi Nime or Hakori, says Zogin, none sender. Simply something as a similar Dani Ni or Mary. Ni made a Hakos. 3 days to his so creation, Jamata will Hakori, Jamata will think the Dagi Ni who studied me, they said, they did so at the Upo, Simaratini, they don't get Musilong, they saw, they say you're the doing non semi so at the meter drama, they rush it out with the test of the Nidina. Giddy Pachality in 3 young Yore, then they look at our young tail, they looked over young tea already. What they tell you, Jamata Thompson, don't hear the author Malamta varied. The men I thought Malampashata are song. 2 minutes, say with the look over 10 hour child already. Some shit may party, some question with Dr. Hago.
So it's really a difference. The difference between the karmic winds and the wisdom winds is the difference between recognizing or realizing or not realizing the nature of the mind. So that's actually a very important question. What is the wisdom winds? So the wisdom winds are like fire, or the wisdom winds recognize, what they recognize is that self and other are inseparable. It recognizes the non-duality of self and other. So even though we may appear externally in different bodies, one recognizes that within the mind there is no division. And for this reason, recognizing that, one does not grasp at whatever arises, whether it is a pleasurable or unpleasurable experience. One sees it all as an illusion, and that's called the illusion-like samadhi. So once there is a perception of self and other, then you are already following the karmic winds, and that is what leads to all kinds of feelings of happiness and suffering, and then you believe in the true existence of all of your feelings and your experiences. And sometimes even though on the outer level there is no real problem, sometimes people like make up problems in their mind and they torment their mind to the point where they even want to commit suicide. So this all happens ultimately because of this karmic imprint of dualistic grasping. And that's the fault of not realizing the nature of the mind. So then what's the quality of realizing the nature of the mind? When you realize the nature of the mind, you will see everything in samsara and nirvana as illusion-like, or like a dream. Like it is said in the 37 practices, all suffering becomes like the death of a child in a dream. You see it all as illusory, but fundamentally you know that no matter what arises, the mind is beyond birth and death. So this is what you recognize when you follow the wisdom winds.
Question 12. From the perspective of a simple practitioner, do the experiences of the 4 yogas of Mahamudra arise in order, or can they arise in a different order?
라랑게 따다 칼라시 그럼 라면에 연구요서리 연구가에서 just 그랬더니 검자를 가린 냠용찌디 주세베가 저거요리 다 상상되는데서 랑 딱지 땅 돌아하고 그러면 그러면 제대 소리지 검들 라미지 저거요리 그래서 다 자롱 냠니지면 또뭐 냠니지면 탐실라 뒤쪽 같으니 가지를 남자를 깨끗이 그랬더니 모티브 탑람송 일사가 왕고거리들이 제기요래 남자들이 깨끗이 제기요래 대사월이 저들이 야는지면 탑재를 가리 로레로레 야도 땅아 마행과 야도로 센터인 로도도 티는 라미를 조고 요래 삼아 사람들이 맹다 하고 말이지 같이 조건 조래 같이 가래 조래.
So actually depending on your own channels and subtle elements, it is possible that they arise in a different order, can arise in various forms, but basically it's not so much that we can determine exactly we can't really draw the line and say, this is exactly where I'm at, and now I'm exactly at this step, and so on. It's basically an ongoing experience, an ongoing habituation that just develops. And we can't really draw the line and say, exactly, this is this and this is that. Basically, we just habituate an ongoing stream of practice. And then it arises differently habituation arises differently for different practitioners. For example, if one is a practitioner of the channels and winds and drops, for example, one practices Dumo, it is said that this practice is actually a skillful means to recognize the 4 levels of joy or bliss, which is one equivalent really with the 4 yogas in a single moment, in a single instant. And that is also mentioned. It is mentioned that it also happens through receiving the secret mantra empowerment. It is said that through the empowerment, actually, the 4 levels of Mahamudra may arise in a single instant. But then also, generally speaking, we habituate to the practice in a gradual way. And so slowly we improve the practice. Basically, the different levels are our personal improvement in a practice. For example, as years go by, you may recognize that I'm a little bit less distracted as the time goes by, my practice improves, and so on. But we can't really determine and label certain levels of practice as this is that stage or this bhumi and so forth. So basically, some develop very quickly and some slowly.
Tata gom jamna rangi trishik takche tala gom tun chikla tili labyo jatata ro yore. Gom tun chikla kare. Gom tangi gom ja gom jishre gom tili symptoms ro re tista chikre. Yingoni tili namto tamche rangi pa shikro kore tista re. Tikani tili zabakayang meba symptoms ngomistiro nene te ro chikre. Tiro tili judo gom tola. tiri gom sem kong so kong raji tiri de so gom ji yi ji ba dok se ko ji te gom yi tun ti la tiri na jo ji yong yo re ji ni bo cha go yong men.
So as you habituate to the practice, you see how your mindfulness develops. And actually, it is also said that the 4 yogas can actually arise in a single session. So what is a single session here? So you're meditating and you're practicing calm abiding. So then the mind is in this calm, thought-free state. So that's one-pointedness. And then within that same state of calm abiding, then whatever thought might arise will just naturally dissolve as it arises. And that is freedom from elaboration. And then one taste is that as you then continue on in this state, you just continue to abide within this even state of mind in a natural way. Everything becomes equal. So that is one taste. When there is no grasping in the mind, all is one taste. And then as you still continue on in that state, finally you might come to the point where you feel, I don't need to actually meditate deliberately any longer. It happens just naturally. There is no effort needed. So the mind just abides in its natural state on its own. There's nothing to be meditated upon. So this is how the 4 yogas can arise within a single session. It arises, but it hasn't become stable.
Question 13. We are told in meditation we should observe our thoughts. When I look at thoughts, they disappear. How can I make them stay so I can observe them?
시 제방을 많이 걸니 로라 도르들이 저를 줘봐 야 찾기 거 옆에 잡라 진시 요 제방을들이 말아리면 로나 나와 람데 체르지 저도라로지 검좀 많이 빠지나 지금 야랑 쪼랑 가르치나 지금 많이 빠지랑 속을 많이 봐서서 요리지 내가 가르치는 만나와 연구 요리 로나 나와라도 체르지 제 랑제들이 이래 바 자리에 비조랑 내다 nga wo na ban de ro ri ti ti yung ram ri pe ri ri ta ta ti shi ge cho wa de la rin so ju na so ba do de li ji ba yo ma ri do da ka de ju ram che si jang se je ne gap che ra shi sem sa wo de yu mi ti che ba ri ti ta ta ko sa wa sem sa wo de yu ba ka ri ma no wa yung yo ri de ri ta ta je ti ju ma yung che ba na mi cha to so de di ti shi je je ti lu ba ri 제 학을 주시 사 만들어 봐 야보지 내 세신성 티제디는 통이 티제디는 주시의 예매 다 하고 거래 그런 거니 주시지 시랍도 팔아서 말이지 좀 무슨 죄가요 그래 시랍도 팔아서 말다 라기 시랍당 영시랍 팔아서 때섭지 동쪽으로 요래 뒤나니지 쪼람 되게더니 네 소소랑을 이식규를 봐서 신경을 거 이 탐지 샘 많이 버걸 가는 로도 내가 삼아지 했고 요래 남들 봐 라브테 따오는 거예요. 때문에 그냥 드시듯이 요미 제발나 차마 놀러 때 자취시 매번 동을 배라 대 연수를 따지자 아마 지시 염지 하면 이제 뭐 트니 대지나 이렇게 핑거래 진실의 제대로 많이 냐도 진실에 이 영마영 하고 그러가 이 딱바들이 제대로 뭐 예를 들면 가르치는 무슨 보빠는 계속 가서 제대로 말라고 그래 배세서 진짜 그래야 돼 그런 탐색이라 대꾸바지 나와 공부 좁았으면 좁았대 그런 탐색을 많이 받이 좁았어 그래
What's most important is to be mindful at all times in whatever you do, to be conscious of whatever you do, whether you're walking, sitting, and so forth, whatever you do, then your meditation will become really well. So the key point is mindfulness. Milarepa had said, when you to take on, basically to practice with the six sense consciousnesses, or to develop kind of an equanimity of the six sense consciousnesses, one should take as the path everything that appears, all appearances. So take as the path all appearances. And so in our daily activities, that means to be mindful, aware of whatever arises, to have a clear mind. When your mind is very clear, whatever you do, it will be unmistaken. So that is what Milarepa also meant with take as the path all appearances as you go about your day-to-day life. So be mindful in whatever you do. If you're unmindful in your activities, then you're following the self. And then that is the path of distraction. In the 37 practices, it sums it up by saying, in brief, no matter what you do, wherever you are, always look at the state of your mind. And always recognize, am I mindful, am I unmindful? So even if you just think about an ordinary samsaric activity, if your mind is unclear, if you're distracted, then you will make mistakes. And on the other hand, if your mind is clear, even in a samsaric activity, you will not make mistakes. Also, what is helpful to sustain mindfulness is to supplicate to Tara. Like it is said in that supplication to Tara, I pray to the mother goddess of mindfulness. So Tara is the goddess of mindfulness. Tara is your own mindfulness. Therefore, whenever you accomplish an activity perfectly, think that this is the blessing of Tara, with the recognition that Tara is indivisible from my own mindfulness. So Tara is connected to your own mindfulness, and she is connected to the perfection of wisdom and your own wisdom. They all have the same meaning. So also in the Heart Sutra, it is said that it is the sphere of activity of intrinsic awareness or wisdom awareness. So if you're mindful, whatever you do becomes this sphere of activity where wisdom acts. When you're distracted, whatever you do, you will be mistaken. So this is really the only difference. And if you're never distracted and mindful in whatever you do, whatever activity you engage in, you can do anything then, and you can do anything unmistakenly, and so forth. So that is the perfect conduct of a yogi. And if you're not able to be mindful all the time, like a perfect yogi, like sometimes you're mindful, sometimes you're unmindful, and then it's possible that mistakes arise. And whenever that happens, it's always the fault of being unmindful. And whenever you feel unmindful and distracted, it's very helpful actually to remember Tara, the goddess, the mother goddess of mindfulness. And so then it may help you to develop some mindfulness. So Tara arises together with mindfulness. So she actually abides in your mind indivisible from your own mindfulness. And when you remember her, it can actually help you be mindful. For example, the Tibetans have a very good habit that whenever they encounter some difficulty, immediately they call for Tara. So just like that, you should be able to remember Tara in all of your activities. And so that is what we call the conduct, the good conduct of the view, the meditation, and the conduct. So the conduct means a state of non-distraction.
Question 14. When does one know one is practicing shamatha and when one is practicing vipassana?
Shala Songre, Shane Gobe Gabi Sakyo. Shane Gom Sim Damse Nesu, Name Dog Maduki, Shibasa was the Level, Tell Santong Lagoyore. The Shibasa was just the Deki on Mare. The Magoma Karasawa, the Deki on Mare, Shibasa was a Nancy Jordi. Sorry, you did a Martok on Taranji, you got Hako on Mare. This is Shane the Santong, Shala Songre. Shawar Manina Santong Jelly Mare, or Santong Songre, Santong the Tipo Charity, Dreze, such a lambda, whatever, Tokyo. This is just a teacher in the Riore. Santong to Kishi. She lay gone the Santong the Corgo, two long time till that Santong Shibati, Corgo. Lama charity.
So Shamatha and Vipassana have to be a union, have to be unified. So actually when Shamatha happens, so when the mind abides calmly, it is from that state actually that Vipassana, or this clear insight, arises. For example, you're meditating and your mind abides still. And you know that. So the mind is still, but you recognize this stillness. And that clear recognition, this clear awareness, that is vipassana, or the special insight. But then this clear awareness does not always stay. When you meditate, it might arise, but then when you don't meditate, it disappears again. So then when you stop meditation, the clear awareness then becomes the consciousness. And the consciousness is the mind that kind of analyzes or discerns external objects, such as self and other and so on. But anyways, when you meditate, shamatha and vipassana have to be a union. Therefore, if you're unable to abide calmly, then vipassana or insight will not arise. They have to arise together. So one arises on the basis of the other. They're interconnected. And when vipassana or insight has become stable, that is actually when you enter that second yoga of the 4 yogas of Mahamudra, of freedom from elaboration. That is when you first begin to realize this second yoga. So basically, the vipassana is mindfulness. That's how you can understand it. When you meditate in a calm state and there is clear awareness, then that is vipassana or special insight. And then this insight has to be brought, basically this mindfulness has to be brought into your day-to-day activities. So that is what we are taking whatever arises as the path.
Question 15. The Shitro Empowerment Samaya says, if I get angry, I'm going to hell. I tend to get angry. Doesn't everyone? I heard that even His Holiness the Dalai Lama is said to have dealt with anger. How can I keep this samaya?
담생 송시는 다들 코초지 일본 거람지 시인이죠. 코초라마 다들 주 생물들이 진실이 오나 진실의 냠들 유mon과 지어는 그 매요 이제 버생지 졸어져 유mon도 졸어져 요리 상통진이 봐야 상통이 보다라 유mon과 지는 유mon과 지는 유mon을 내사 그러면 가래 유mon이 초가대 파이션들이 세상은 싸와 도착하지 대화 또 먹으라지 뭐 소바 유몬 독수 깨지라 코초가대 이신은 말씀 이게 왔더니 대설부터 섬데 유몽 독섬 민 대설부터 섬는 저런 거요래 대리들이 다다리 황통 친이 바에는 다다 유몽 어쩌는 유바 유몽과 팽이요래 베르초 공자 이 코디오는 저기 세상치 홍 떠지 주는 라산 코초랑 라산 메테르 파마다 참 세상치 거를 쓸 때는 사자치 뭐 딱딱 그 이제 소를 냅둬요 그거 저 소리서 제작기 뺏어서 되네. 들이 지가리들이 파라파시 딱 가리 세달라고 말이. 세달랑 책송선이 세달 소화인 거에 샘세라고 오는 거래. 들이 상하는 유목만 빵 남도 체에서 상하는 유목이 누가 매서 대 소화 되다가 노자체다 또 목숨 같아. 또 먹으면 말람줘서 도차를 대회에서 세상은 쌀을 쌀지 해서 네 쌀부터 네 제만을 배송 온 것상 무서 빨아 추가 정시 대화기를 롱거 정시 사과기를 쪼가 정성 사지 것은 사무한테 제만을 배 책대 줘서 그 세마송 이게 진짜 이게 좀 망고요래 들이랑 샘들 저 삶았다 오 겁들로 집어넣어 대화를 놓고 좋다 놓고 시작하면서 때려줘 대화를 그랬지 싸와도 샘싸워 때 시바 싸울 때 싸와도 대화니가 샘못 집어서는 가만히 봐 내 삶에서 그리 나도 라니가 들이 나도 답이 싫어 나도 마샤와요 뭐래 대답들 들면서 바로 추가 좀 대화를 놓고 좀 싸와를 쪼가 좀좀 그렇게 샘 내롭게 이 책대 고는 들이지 ben된 강체로 오 들이지 라고 생구 용띠지 아 코들이 사지 거서 사원이 봐 하고 듣고요.
So if you know how to keep samayam, and then even a very fierce thought of anger is by nature actually primordial wisdom, primordial awareness. And so how that happens is that when anger arises actually within mindfulness, so you are already mindful, and the anger arises within mindfulness. So the affliction and mindfulness kind of co-emerge. They arise simultaneously. It is just like the wood arises in the presence of the fire. So the fire is already there when the wood comes. And in that case, then the wood actually helps the fire, or the afflictive emotion enhances one's awareness. Also a sign of vipassana, actually, there's a quality of vipassana, a special insight, is that if an afflictive emotion does arise, but one will not accumulate any karma. It will disintegrate, and also the feeling that it comes along with that emotion. There will be no feeling left behind. So, for example, anger has the nature of clarity, and So there is this luminosity, a clear feeling of a feeling of clarity, and then from bliss arises, or attachment arises. When attachment is transformed, that turns into like a kind of a luminosity of bliss, so basically a blissful experience. And when ignorance is transformed, it becomes non-conceptuality. So there are these three kinds of awareness that arise. When the three afflictive emotions ripen, then they ripen into bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality. So again, a quality of vipassana is that even though an affliction arises, it actually becomes an enhancement to your practice. So it, for example, when you're meditating, or sleeping, as you're meditating, and a person comes along and just like shoves you or hits you a bit. Like normally, you immediately get really upset about it, angry. So then, when that anger arises, don't look at the person, don't think of the person, but look directly at the anger, and then you see that you have actually directly come to the natural state of the mind, or the state of Mahamudra. Because when you see the quality of this anger, it actually is very clear. The quality of anger is clarity. It is empty clarity. And a sign of really having recognized it is that the feeling of anger is completely gone, and all there is this feeling of complete clarity, of pristine clarity. And that is a special method of the secret mantra of the Vajrayana, where it is said that the afflictive emotions are actually taken as the path without abandoning them. The afflictive emotions are not regarded as something harmful, but they are utilized as the path itself. So attachment, anger, and ignorance. For example, ignorance is related to the recognition of the dream state, or the luminosity of the dream state. And desire, attachment is transformed into luminous bliss, and hatred is transformed into luminous clarity. Also, the other day, you mentioned this quote by Milarepa, who said that from non-conceptuality arises the Dharmakaya, from bliss arises the Sambhogakaya, and from clarity arises the Nirmanakaya. This is how Milarepa showed that the three kayas of the Buddhas, as in their seed form, are present within the mind. It arises from within the mind. So therefore, no, these are very important words by Milarepa, and many of you like to take notes from teaching, so that would be one to write down and to remember, and really look at it sometimes and really apply it to your mind and really reflect on the meaning of these words by Milarepa. How it really actually, how these seeds are really present within the mind, where there is a moment of non-conceptuality, and then recognize that this is really the Dharmakaya, the essence of the Dharmakaya. Or when a feeling of great joy or bliss arises, then recognize that this is the essence of the Sambhogakaya, and it is from this bliss that all the Pure Lands and the deities arise from. And then the same with clarity. So from the clarity then arises the Nirmanakaya. So speaking about clarity and bliss, actually they are not two separate things. Actually they have one and the same essence. Actually all three of them, bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality. Because when there is no thought in your mind, the mind is clear and also very blissful. When you do not hold on to any thought whatsoever, then that is the quality of Dharmakaya. And from that arises a blissful feeling, and that is the quality of Sambhogakaya. And within that bliss, there is great clarity, and from that arises the Nirmanakaya. So when you understand these words and then apply them to your mind, then these words will help you to really gain some real clarity or confidence that this is really actually applies to your own mind, the nature of your own mind. These are all qualities inherent within my own mind. So this is how we should understand that the seeds of the three kayas are present within your own mind.
Next question. How does one attain realization in the Bardo? Why is the Bardo similar to dreams?
Bardo the Malam Chipan, Malam only Chang support Yasan and Yai Yoris. Same the Charto Yorin, Chaco Sama Semi, send it in Nimpal Nigeria Yoris. The Gubo and Sima Soa that Nimpal Soa Career to the Jerry Yoris. They Bardo and Major from Bozo. Zo Meba, Soa and Dushi, the Namsi Jeo, Major from Bozo. Tata Gom John in Calgary. 대도고 초와탐지 시라고 뜻이 인성나 바팀 천상대 시작도고요. 데르들 답변하면 찾도록 우보도 심에서 밀 들이 이답라이 바티 생각이 차로고요. 우보도 심마 운이도 데르들이 나기니 차당이 지스마요. 그래서 우보도 심마 우세더니 동에 용고요. 바도상 말함이 저기 말함이 창을 Zog me back single toa yungole, take us our hako yore, Deji bar taket angores. You can't zog the best toa the widow. Say the Maramoni Zopori, don't hit so what you can yore. They sangulated, move on, see my day, shake tomata. Ah, you military. There is other same case of Bebasan, Hakona, the justice woman someone. Ten that are some partos and check the top of Namjala. The Bardo. 납치디 찌르기 싸움서는 그냥 가는 나와 탐지 가래 들이 말아리 바람지 들이 착각 동에라서 왔든지 도마다는 통로들이 나다 딴 잘리 접더니 웃어 대답은 접더요 동태래 근데 이제 말하면 빨리 체비는 고발롱도 쳐봐요 곰자 그냥 말람들이 간이 쪽발이지 일보요 미들더니 말람으로 초가 독상들이 하고나 그래서 말람이 가지고 다 쪼가 차는 거니 내가 초가 청들라고요 내가 무보던 심만 짬이나 또 담지 용들라고요 동태
So how are the Bardo and dreams the same? So look at yourself when you are dreaming at night. When you're sleeping at night, your body lies there sleeping in your bed, but all kinds of things arise within your mind. So the dream arises within the mind, not the body. And it is because in our waking state, the daytime perceptions, that we also cling to the true existence of all of our activities and all appearances, that we will do the same in the dream state. So in the dream state, we experience similar feelings as we do during the waking state. And then later in the Bardo, the only difference is that we have left behind the aggregate of the body, but we still have the four aggregates and the name. So we have the consciousness, and we have perception and karmic formation and feelings. We just don't have a body. And so when you habituate now, when you're still alive, to meditation and recognize all these feelings of happiness and sadness and so on arising, recognize it all with mindfulness, and if you're able to let them go and let them dissolve without clinging on to them, then also you will be able to let go or dissolve the confused perceptions of the Bardo later on. And when they dissolve, instead, then pure perceptions begin to arise in the Bardo. So then the Bardo, the state itself becomes a pure land wherein many Yidam deities appear. But then if you continue, on the other hand, if you continue to hold on, you cling to the true existence of all your experience and all arising, the true existence of self and other, and you follow your thoughts of attachment and aversion and so on, then you will experience actual suffering, also in the Bardo. So actually, the Bardo and the dream state are one and the same. There is no body, as opposed to the waking state. In the dream, you don't have a physical body, but you still have exactly the same feeling that you have as you have during the daytime. So therefore, when we practice, we recognize that through mindfulness. We recognize these feelings that also arise within the dream state. And so if you begin to recognize this, if you begin to recognize your dreams and see that actually the waking state and the dream state is all the same, it's all the same as in it's all your own mind, then naturally you will suffer much less also during the waking state. So it all comes down to your ability to let go of the belief in a true concrete existence of appearances, and also whether or not you possess the view, seeing the nature of the mind, which means knowing whether or not you know that the mind transcends birth and death. Lord Jigten Sumgön had said, I am a yogin who has realized that this life, the Bardo, and future lives are one. So when you recognize this, then slowly, through mindfulness, also the intense feelings that you may experience during the waking state at daytime slowly will become lesser and lesser. So as you begin to recognize that it's all the same, the dream state, the Bardo state, the waking state, and then naturally all these coarse feelings of heat and cold and suffering and so on in the waking state, also you will begin to see them just like an illusion. And it is actually from this understanding that eventually we realize we accomplish the rainbow body. So Milarepa also had said that when you realize that the daytime, the waking state, and the dream state are one, then you have mastered practice, your meditation. That is when you know that you know how to meditate. So when you know how to meditate, you see no difference between the waking state and the dream state. The only difference maybe lies in having or not having a physical body, but the feelings are one and the same. And when you recognize that it's mainly the feelings that make your experience, the mind is the same in the waking state, in the dream state, then naturally you won't develop these powerful, strong feelings during the waking state too. They will become a little less intense gradually. Because as your fixation to a concrete existence diminishes, along with that also your fixation to various feelings and thoughts, emotions will diminish.
Tata melam gu kami mei ma mi ji nyang kha yu mo ba mei ma phe ti ta de li ha ko melam ka ni jeng nang che bo ju melam ha ko ma ta yi che bo de jeng nang che bo che lo de lam sa ta ba to lo lo ji jeng nang che to yo le sai da ta ni ka gu yu mo ba che ta la tin melam ti ka mi ji ka yin che ka li che u mo de la melam zhe zhe yin zo melam zhe bo de ha ko zo melam ja bo de wa chi che ga wa de wa to mo ni che to ko yo ma le 정상 깨지 정상 첨부지를 깝들이 다지 오탄말람 레스 하고 토그를 말람 잠정 뜻이 이오도 말람 잡어지 하고를 들이지 때서 다야 말람 그 고민 양농 역시들이 말람 suppose project에서 거래더니 고탑자 똑바로 될 말람 생사고요리 내이 koksunti 때 고타고 그 돈들이 냐들이 말람 생겨요 생각하고요
So Milarepa had said, so he was sad, yeah. So, okay. So in the dream state, now when you're dreaming, what is a way to recognize the dream state? And so again, whether or not we recognize it also has to do with whether or not we are ripening, maturing the mind. So normally, on an ongoing basis, we don't really recognize a dream state. But when you experience a lot of fear in a dream, when you run into a great, a frightening experience, then actually it's quite easy during the dream to recognize the dream and to recognize the view, to come to the natural state of the mind. And then the fear will instantly go away. But then if you're able, first of all, it begins with the daytime practice. So if you're able to eliminate, disintegrate all these afflictive emotions that arise, then in the dream state, you may first recognize those dreams that are more frightening, like a terrifying nightmare and so on. It is that there's two kinds of dreams. There is the nightmares, and then there is very pleasant dreams. If now they're able to recognize even the pleasant dreams, that is actually the best sign. But normally we don't recognize these blissful or pleasant dreams. Normally, when we are afraid in our dreams, when we have a nightmare, then we are able to recognize, oh, this is just a dream. Actually, when you then are also able to recognize even the gentle or like the pleasurable, nicer dreams, then actually that shows that your meditation is really developing well, because that's more difficult. Most people actually are able to recognize their nightmares, their bad dreams to some extent. It's easier to recognize them. And also actually one helpful tool for that is to wear a meditation belt that actually can also help you to recognize the dream state. So normally, however, when we just go to sleep, it is more difficult to recognize it.
Next question. Could you give some advice for new translators?
나 저도 깹줄 집안에 다섯 자지 파실게 들리는 자가 요 말이 들이다 답처럼 지팀으로 니네들이 다 지팀으로 깨절나 들이지 시랍리 제대로 피바다 되어야지 답이 출력지바다 강리들 제대로지가 통을 끼어 나서 하고 레집대 하고서 거리 들이 제일게 저렇다들이 깨디 쪽저리들이 끼어처럼 말을 대기요 들이 책도 우리 하고 저렇다들이 사지에 집안에들이 깨저탑지 사지 그 취집의 비용성 들이다다 취집의 비용 취 강나 취 나와 보탑지들이 시성을 고바식성을 들이지 그동 메타당한테 도와포체 탐절들이 타파성을 템도서 사지게 마보성을 공로비성을 나기제 지금도 그 비용된 통성 그래서 이따들이 취시바래들이 고바 비용치를 이 취시바를 깨라는 걸 절리 이게 저와탑들이 저와들이 삐디디랑들이 약과서 저터는 들이 절자와티 주치시 배도 땅을 지수남들이 라랑 덮고요. 지수남시 바지가 강리들이 어따다 빼샤만 벗을람리 대말이 수남 센터에 봐야 체육 사지에 와서 수남 센터에 봐 수남도 상계를 두고 심지어 피바다 디와도 대사지들이 수남이 산지 정지들이 수남 탑토가 되는 수남 세바에 봐들이 사제 꼬마기 바에 돌아서 출려서 답이 출로고 되지. 그러니까 답이 출로고 심지 탑체를 잡아서 말이지. 역시 말로가 되지 체디 비바. 배는 나라는 말한테 말하는 되지. 체들 비바 코나게 체들이 이래서 그냥 뭐하게 제답 심지를 넣어서는 역시 치 탐치 같은 비바는 정도고 비바들 되면서 탐치들이 사직을 자와시바 시자시 사지사와 제종 그래서 취지이 니가들이 사지사와를 줬고요래 저들 무슨 저도 고마 라미 차대와 연발 시바들 다시 그리스도는 타고요래 연발 마시나 다기나 이디나 되더니 다양한 수능된 조금 말이야 다기 이디나 되네 수능 청구요래 삭개지기 와는 줄로요래 이렇게 별필 쳐버려 너를 깨비를 가려버리든 샘기 탐지 팽호선 사바세미지 요사를 들적살에 사바세미 로스 고리지 추피무지 하고 그래 야합서가 맥세다는 가리페는 맥마세 누가 가는데 체도 찍고는 진짜 직진들하고 자꾸 그래 단축과 작거래 다시는 가르치어도 직진 체도 찍고 상황들이다 다 차당 무슨 체지다 직진 가면도 해서 이제 체도 세지가 상황들이 대자 세디에다 대라서 세지 삼지 삼모다 pension 약합인을 초과시라자 말 삼모다 깨자시 pension 대체 체지 조고 상황에서 다 초과자 다 가르쳐야 돼 삼지 너게 토로 너게지 대체 다 쌓고요래 뒤 싸워서 가래 세고 내려 봤지 준비 하바가 그래 들이다 너게 나불리가 너게 준비 마시게 근데 좀 권한 주고요래 준비 싫은데 따면 조금 말해 이 준비에 싸워야지 깨를 톡대요 얘기를 톡대요래 이렇게 입절 탑지 하자 수 넘지 모르야 돼 그냥 손놈 그 토로 손놈이란 게 꼴홍들로 봤다고 사바세 미바 담보 취지 용 진시 담보 취지 필무듯이 마시비니 맥매 받아도 잘해 그리고 끼하면서 내좀 내가 시설 맥니요래 배지다고 하고는 그래서 입절도 손놈 치슈래 그러면 교신이 제발 빠싸요 말이야 소소한 개비신이 인상들이 사지지죠. 인상도 받을 때는 피셈 같이 있는 데는 무슨 팬이요래. 피셈 총량지 양습진을 팬받 총고요래. 손놈 제종한 그 공홍로라 레바레지.
So a translator, and not all kinds of translation are the same, because there are translators in a mundane sense, worldly translators, and then there are translators of the Holy Dharma. So in a mundane sense even, a translator, the activity of a translator still is an activity of wisdom, and of course it's still beneficial, but it is just beneficial for this life. Whereas a translator of the Holy Dharma actually sees not just this life, but also future lives. They see karma, cause and effect, and that is then why they are able to translate. It is through recognizing that. So they recognize the preciousness, the importance of the Dharma, and also of karma, cause and effect. And so it is extremely beneficial to be a translator, because if you're able to translate well, then, for example, the teachings are recorded and then they remain for many generations to come. In all your future lifetimes, you will continue to accumulate great merit. So actually, if one is able to translate well, one actually is one and the same. One is one with the Buddha. One is just like a Buddha. And so a translator first translates because they understand the benefits of the Dharma. And they know the benefit that they bring to those who listen to the Dharma. And therefore, even after they have died, and of course, depending on the motivation, the merit will continue to remain. The merit will not go away. So actually, therefore, we can say a translator really, there's no difference between a translator and a spiritual teacher. And also, I think I saw somewhere, and that even the Buddha spoke about the benefits of that, of speaking the Dharma, and then one listens to the Dharma. Is that so? Somebody like that who has done that, and then after they have died, and their body is burned, then even through the smoke coming from their body, if that smoke then touches anyone, whoever is touched by the smoke coming from their body, will have the seed of liberation planted within them. So maybe the other teachers know more about that, but I saw that somewhere. And so there's a really great benefit in translating the Dharma into one's own languages that we can understand. And if you're able to translate really well, then however long these teachings then remain, you will continue to accumulate great merit. And so what is the merit actually? Well, people think that merit means to be rich, but that's not what merit is. It is said that may I attain enlightenment in a single lifetime, which is the endless accumulation of merit. So the ultimate merit is enlightenment. And also, when whatever you do to bring benefit and happiness to sentient beings, that is what we call merit on a relative level. And the ultimate merit is to attain enlightenment. So merit means to cultivate compassion for all sentient beings. And even in a mundane sense, that's very beneficial. It is just that in a mundane sense, normally we just think about this life. We do those things for only this life. But even then, even if you were to dedicate those mundane virtues with a motivation of bodhicitta, even that becomes beneficial. Then, for example, even science or any worldly activity becomes beneficial, becomes a real Buddha activity. As it is said, everything that's done in the field of knowable things in this world is done by Buddha. So, therefore, in this way, everything that you do in the Dharma or the world can become an activity of the Buddha. So then you don't actually have to make it become that way. It just happens naturally because of your motivation. So, but what is important here is that you recognize the merit actually. If you don't recognize the merit that comes from, for example, the translation, then if you don't recognize, then there is still a grasping to self and other. And for as long as there's grasping to self and other, the merit is much smaller. It becomes more a defiled virtue, a worldly virtue. But so in general, translation can be extremely unbeneficial because it brings great benefit to beings. And so again, what really benefits beings is your immeasurable love for them. So that's what a translator needs to have. They need to have immeasurable love for all sentient beings. And they need to understand the benefits of the Dharma. And understand that the Dharma and also the understanding of karma is really what gives you eyes, like two open eyes. And this is what has helped you in previous lives and also will help you now. And all fault comes from not recognizing that. This is then how things become worldly. We can see now when people don't recognize. Now we're speaking about immeasurable love here, this intention, then we can see when we look around in this world nowadays, this is then what happens. Then there's a lot of conflict and a lot of fighting between people and between countries and so on. This is what happens when we just think about this life, when we just think about this world. Then we develop all kinds of negative thoughts and create much conflict among each other. But someone who actually thinks not just about this life, but also future lives, they will see the futility in fighting. For example, then even theoretically, countries would fight much less with each other if they would see that. So it's really, all this fighting and conflict really comes from the focus on just this life. And in this way, we are piling suffering upon suffering. And the root of all that is not to see the true nature of the mind, not to really understand karma. So basically, it's really the fault of not understanding karma. This is really the reason why there is so much suffering in the world, is because we don't understand karma and we can only see this life. And so then, if one understands karma, then that would naturally not happen. And so, therefore, we can see how crucial the understanding of karma is, and the understanding of karma comes down to understanding the words that are being said to the language, and therefore the translator, or the texts that are being translated, or the words that are being said. And that is why it is such a great merit to translate. And so again, it is most important to have a completely pure motivation. First of all, that you understand the qualities of the Dharma, and also understand the faults of not knowing the Dharma, which is just like being a blind person. Once you really understand karma, it's like having two open eyes. And so because translators make that understood to others, it is really the greatest merit to be a translator. And there is not the slightest difference between a translator and a spiritual teacher. And therefore you should think of yourself, I'm a spiritual teacher because I'm a follower of the Buddha. And therefore, approach it from an altruistic perspective. The greater your altruism, the greater will be the benefit. The smaller your altruism, the smaller will be the benefit. So really the size, or kind of the amount of merit that you are accumulating is directly related to your motivation. And so then there's one extremely most important point for any translator, or of like oral translation or written, or actually anyone who engages in Dharma activity, and that is cultivate immeasurable love. Because when immeasurable love arises, then really your mind will follow the meaning of the words that you are expressing. And then of the two kinds of virtue, the defiled and undefiled virtue, if you cultivate immeasurable love, it all becomes undefiled, or you're accumulating, really the accumulation of wisdom. So that is important, and that is that's my hope, that's my wish for the translators.
현고만은 추발은 저러고요. 현고만은 대통령 빌적을 현고만사를 라는 게 등에서 초를 저러 민다고 너저 유모 등에도 너다고 등에도 너는 그래서 이식을 짜다 이제서 고대이가 잡고로 사바세미 고요리 랑 사바세미들 랑 이치요 받쳐서 그래서 사바세미나 잡을인데 등에서 송 셈마 같은 센토를 거 세지 등에 라미를 내본 거요래 갑들이 됐다고 들은 문에서 팽이요래 셈지는 이제 지어한테 산지는 추가 셈이 받대 그래서 왜 사바세미 때 짜치슈예스 그래서 뭐라면 그래서 뭐 주바 뭐 조조 뭐라는데 다답지 저도 로라 빼야 보여래 되게 사바든지 철철 줘요래
It is said in the King of Aspiration Prayers for Excellent Conduct that the power that's all pervasive is the power of love. And so it's not just a love for sentient beings, but for example, if the love is directed towards the higher beings, then it becomes an offering. And if it is directed towards sentient beings, suffering sentient beings, then it becomes an accumulation of merit. It is medicinal. It is like nectar. Nectar means in Tibetan dutsi, and du actually means mara, and that is the mara of the afflictions and suffering. And tsi means elixir, like an ambrosia, and that is the elixir of primordial wisdom that is applied onto the mara of suffering and the afflictions. And so you need immeasurable love. This is like this medicine, like this tutsi, like an ambrosia. Immeasurable love is what pervades everything, samsara and nirvana. And you need to be able to be confident, trust in your own love. For example, if you possess immeasurable love, then when you witness the suffering in this world, for example, or any suffering of any other sentient being, then it will come to you and you will feel their suffering naturally. And when that happens, then you actually are able to benefit them. So that is what you call immeasurable compassion. And if you, that is the kind of compassion or the love that is so precious. So that is the love that is like medicinal. And to develop such immeasurable love, then encourage you to, it would be good to recite this King of Aspiration prayers for excellent conduct, and also the Shantideva dedication prayer from the Bodhicharya Vatara. If you read that on an ongoing basis, that will really help you a lot to increase your love and compassion.
Next question. I'm worried about my son. He is a good boy, but has a lot of bad influences. He isn't interested in the Dharma and often perceives me as a nag. How can I utilize my Dharma practice in this situation?
대다와에는 버스를 집으로 상주지나 만남 가다니 메시지들 범하지와 직접요 말이 참아라 상태시들 들이코라 팽겨래 버스 집으로 제일되나 대기들이 비누이 가지고 요래 이 다다다데 사바세미 공을 버스 참아 범하지와 직접요 말이 상태시고래 이 버치벌 맥되나 들이 장념이 제만아 코라 총총마다 팽거 말이 이 빼는 메도들랑 저 담배간로나 갈팽 거리 이 차바 방문들이 메도 3만 배 대다고 상관한 거리 들 빼만 보면 답주 마고시 사발이 들이 되게 걸었다 거리 들이 문제돼서 마기 파기 잠시 고시 그 랑세다고 빼만 보면 시 차다 들이 소리 말이 그래서 가사 찔러 시지 어디지 이제랑 신바지 그 비누니가 요래 뻑을 하자 차는 뻑이 싫어야 요래 배세다 하장 나디게 저한테 그 요래 사마스미리 저거래서
And so you should not just think of your child, but think that all sentient beings, limitless as space, have been my child. And actually, if you expand your love and you love them all, then that will actually help your son even more. If you just think of your son, then it will have both benefits and faults. So it's better to cultivate immeasurable love and think that there is no being who has not been my child in previous lives. And so, especially also for you, since you're a practitioner, if you still just think of your child, then the benefit will be really much smaller. It's just like if you want to water a flower and you just pour a cup of water over your flower. That's a smaller benefit than just having the rain watering all of the flowers. So there are actually many stories and many examples about that. And in the past, actually, I shared many different stories and teachings on that. So you can also look at that. For example, there is stories about how the elder father and mothers then took different births and so on. Anyways, there's different stories, and we don't have much time to go into that now. But in brief, cultivate immeasurable love. Because if your love and your compassion is ordinary and limited, then that has both benefit, but also it has faults. And actually, also, if you just cling so much to your child, if you're so attached to, if you just want the best for your child, then actually sometimes it's even possible that your kind of excess care actually leads to the child's death. So that is how self-grasping kind of love actually causes harm. That is why to have a more expansive love, an immeasurable love.
메시지라 파기게 벌써 왔지 뭐요 배 야글이랑 마기게 벌 놀러 찾고시 뭐요 배 책지 왔랑 들고 불운다고 세들랑 뽀거리지 왔랑들이 파기야 됐세 들이 샤사 마기 체주들이 차거를 봐 마기를 때 들이 다리 불운다고 돼 뽀거리는 빵을 랑체를 파샤 사신 말아 데 담냐 잡아 빵을 랭 코블레 데 심바도 송세 데 아크도 메선 말이 데 테스타블레 데 버티다다 버티지 않으면 다니까 이 하고 말이 저는 바다로 자이시야 요래 버더 아쿠톤바 하고
So there's this one story about now there was this father back in Tibet in the old days. So there was this father who loved his son very much. He was very attached to his son out of love. And so then after the father died, he was born as the family's yak. And then the mother was attached to the son's wealth. And then the mother, after she died, she was born as the family's dog. And then the enemy, kind of the creditor of the family, was eventually born as that son's child, as the family's child. And so then the son killed the father, who was the yak, and then ate the father's flesh, basically, and then gave the bones to the dog, which was the mother, and held the enemy of the family on his lap. So it says then in that kind of text quotation that he eats the flesh of the father and beats the mother and holds the enemy on their lap. The nature of samsara, the state of samsara, is truly repulsive. So that story was told by Akudamba. So basically what it shows is that it's so uncertain whether that child really is an enemy or a friend. But if the child causes you a lot of harm, then it's likely an enemy from a previous life.
Bardo kai se to tamalaga no tobere se dachibore sang rinji the bat shok chung de re ta ko sambat inji yore de lincha da ko re te
So if you have a lot of attachment to your child, you can think of it in this way. First, it took my body, then it took my food, and then it even took my wealth. So the child is my real enemy. So if you think that way, then your attachment to the child will be much lesser. And you will still have love for them, but you will see them as a karmic creditor.
Next question. I find it hard to pronounce Om Mani Padme Hum like you. I feel that my recitation is not accurate. I want to recite it like you. What should I do?
니버 양대 비용치보 양니보를 뛰네 참마케 니는 들이잖아 바로서 버터는데 라단 콜로나나 쪽 저도 라단 콜로시 니들 들이 냠는 노는 들이 제로 연거리 해대 대 아주 많이 양설 합쳐버리 돈까지 많은 빼비에 마성 상쪽 선바지 선바지 상거요.
So the melody of the Mani mantra is extremely beneficial, actually. And actually all the melodies of all the mantras, when we chant them in this beautiful melody, it actually can also become a practice of the 6 paramitas, especially the Mani mantra. And so what you can do is you can get a CD, a recording of the mantra, and then play it at home and chant along with the mantra in melody. And then actually it will happen, and you will chant like that. And this particular melody of the Mani mantra has a lot of blessings. It is the kind of the Drigung Kagyu, kind of 8-fold lotus melody that is called 8-fold because the 8 male and female bodhisattvas are complete within the Mani mantra.
Last question. What are the best Buddhist practices when we live in a busy, noisy household?
대체 초와 그랬지로 곰잡 초와 되어야 대 초와 지야 그래 곰잡잖아. 대리 초와 그러면 뭐만 도요. 정말 좀 왔다 그래. 고속 같은 다보 다속질이 다 랍상들이 실내 고주고 그랬지. 레리기서 마땅 실내 고주는더니 딱 고속 요작 가서는 봐요 말했더니 세군이 네 일이서
Whenever a feeling arises, whatever feeling arises, whether it's pleasant or not, we should meditate and don't cling to the feeling. The feeling will go away on its own. And then you will see all these happenings around you as illusory. So then you do what you need to do, but whenever a feeling arises, just instantly come to Shamatha, calm abiding, and don't think about each and everything that happens. Just think that no matter how much trouble they make, how much trouble they make, it doesn't really harm, it doesn't really bother me. So most important is that you don't cling, don't grasp at thinking in terms of this is what happened, that's what happened. You don't think about it.
고소 초바대도 가리술로 고소 내요래. 차 타마 타게 도구만이. 차 타게 마서로 수신 양민처럼 피고나 다 독식이 티주대. 나또 초바 가리지구나 딱게 마당 티주 파 타게 곰잡잖아. 그리 가용해 봐요. 고토대 가리지는 서섬직장 하자미 누군가를 착바미도 곰잡지야 빼야고 그러더니 저도 가르치지. 저를 내라는 걸 내야지. 곰잡지를
So then whatever those your family members around you, whatever they experience, whether they're happy or not unhappy, it's also their own karma, and you cannot decide, you cannot take on everything, you cannot do everything. So if you want to benefit them through practice, for example, you can practice the Tekchu of the Dzogchen practice, and that means that whenever a thought or a feeling arises, don't analyze it, don't think about it, but cut through it directly and meditate. And then you won't be affected by what's happening around you. As it is said, even if the 3 worlds would come to an end, there is no fear. There is no attachment to the 5 desirables of the senses. So then you detach and you think, no, let them do whatever they want to do. Whatever they do won't really affect you. And that is when your meditation becomes beneficial. So basically whatever arises, just think, do whatever you want, and just straight directly go to meditation without thinking about it.
Thank you so much, Your Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, for answering all of these questions with your great wisdom and compassion. Thank you, Ina, for all your translation.
어쨌든 좋아트 두기 제디 마음과 좋아트 두는 양 완전히 랑그 세부 검잡을 세부트라 세부들 라마리에시 이 시합 랑지기 양 하고야 요리 완전히 좋았다 랑그 세부트 좋았지.
Thank you for your questions, and then if you have more questions in the future, you can ask yourself when you are meditating. So actually, when you are meditating, the guru is actually your own mind. You do have the wisdom in your mind, and when you really ask your question, like you can take it like a self-empowerment, and then you can ask yourself your own wisdom mind the question, and then an answer will really come. So so later on, you can ask your own mind.
Please join us tomorrow for our Nongye retreat, and we will begin at 9 a.m. Everyone, thank you. Take care.
Oi mane be me